Well, I wanted to thank everybody for turning out this evening. I've been doing this program for a couple of years and I'm never finished with a program. So when I take more pictures, I always move things around, add things, remove things, constantly learning. But I wanted to start the program this evening with a bit of a tribute to Whitefish Point. The storm kind of wiped out a lot of the point there, and it is my absolute favorite place to photograph migrant shorebirds. So I just wanted to share a few pictures from up there, just to kind of memorialize what once was there. My screen is not. I might have to unshare here and get back in. Give me 1 second, please. It worked so smoothly before. Anyway, I think we're working now.
There we go.
Yeah, just wanted to share some images from my favorite place to photograph migrant shorebirds. Um, Most people have seen a lot of shorebirds in migration, and they don't do nearly the cool stuff that they do on the breeding grounds, but there's still beautiful images to be made. This was a surprise at Whitefish Point in early September, actually. A purple sandpiper flew in. More about that in a bit. But this was my original view of shorebirds, and it took me 10 years to really get interested in shorebirds once I'd started birding. I was out there in the heat of the day in the brightest light, and really I couldn't identify any of them for good reason. They were far away. There was heat shimmer, lots of contrast. But then I learned if you got low and took your time, you could get much closer. And I started going out in better light, visualizing these birds in early morning light, late afternoon light instead of a midday. Pro tip: waders only work if you keep the tops above the water. Here's another one from Whitefish Point, and this is the first of several Baird sandpipers that I'm going to share. Just to kind of kick off all the cool different things that shorebirds do. So I photographed this one from Whitefish Bay, looking back at the point. I was out there, no waders in September, getting kind of cold, but this bird was bathing at the water's edge. And after they bathe, a lot of times shorebirds will preen. They speed skate. Most people don't know that about Baird sandpiper. It's their favorite Olympic sport. I have no idea what this guy's doing, but another Baird sandpiper that appears to be having a good time. Baird sandpipers have been called grass pipers. Frequently, they're not at water's edge, but they're on the damp shore in the short grasses, picking up little morsels to eat. And then I saw them on the breeding ground and they looked completely different. At least some of them do. Others still look like they do when they come through here in migration, but this one has a really striking black and white patterning to it. And here's another friendly Baird sandpiper waving hello. Very nice of him to greet us at Barrow. This is part of his breeding display. But anyway, so there's a lot of different things to talk about with shorebird behavior. First, let's talk about how these birds feed. And some of the shorebirds have really, really long bills. And they'll use those to probe deeply into the mud, deeper than most of the other shorebirds can reach, so they can access a different food source. The short-billed dowitcher is known to do the sewing machine motion while feeding. And many of the shorebirds with long bills have what's called a prehensile bill. It has a flexible bill tip, which is just packed with little nerve endings. Those are actually called Herbst corpuscles, if I'm saying that correctly. And those nerve endings allow them to probe up and down and actually feel when they hit a prey item, at which point they can snap that bill closed and grasp it and go about feeding. The American woodcock does also have that prehensile bill style. Long-billed curlews have this super long decurved bill, and they probe really deep in the sand, shoving their bill all the way in there to where their face is almost in the sand, and they're grabbing the little crabs out of the substrate there, and they're feeding on these things that have a hard shell. The crabs have a hard shell. This is a red knot feeding on zebra mussels. This was up at Point Mouillet in Michigan. And willets, they're getting tiny little clams and they're swallowing them whole or crushing them. Ruddy turnstones eat a lot of mussels, and all of these birds have to regurgitate, much like a hawk or an owl would after consuming bugs that are not digestible. This little least sandpiper was actually making a living on, it's going to be hard to see for me, it's right under the stop share button, but there's a little gnat here on this blade of grass. And these guys were on the beach and jumping up and catching these tiny little gnats and sustaining life with them. Some shorebirds have long legs, but not a super long bill, but the long legs allow them to get out into deeper water and thus accessing, yet another food type. Avocets have super long legs. That slightly upturned bill is used to sweep back and forth across the water. And I didn't know this till I actually observed it, but in migration, avocets will flock up and actually kind of prance and run through the water, stirring up the food on the bottom. And the birds at the back of the group then were doing the sweeping and grabbing of food. And then they would mix it up and others would go to the back and get to eat as well. Lesser yellowlegs, they will actually very, very actively pursue food. This one was chasing minnows, and it would run around like a crazy person and snap the bill shut and come up with a tiny fish. This is an oyster catcher, and if you visualize what an oyster knife might look like, it seems like it was designed right after nature, just perfect for prying open those bivalves. This is actually the Australian oyster catcher. I photographed this guy about a year ago in Australia. And then we have shorebirds with shorter bills, and the black-bellied plover. Credit Jamie Cunningham on this. I'll try. Most of these are mine, but I'll try to remember to credit those that have shared some examples with me. The black-bellied plovers are well known for grabbing these marine worms and tugging them out of the sand. So feeding closer to the surface. So Wilson's plover, this bird completely dismembered this crab, actually took every leg off of it before swallowing the abdomen whole. Buff-breasted sandpipers, we were really lucky and had a group visit at Mombi Bay State Park a number of years ago, and they just love to go up on the lawn and feed on the moths in the short grass. Most everyone's been to a beach where the sanderlings chase the waves back and forth. So what are they chasing? Maybe you've seen them run down and start digging into the sand at the water's edge. Maybe you've even seen the little bubbles coming up from under the sand. But if you look closely, a couple of these birds have a little critter in the bill here. and we're going to look closer. But this is actually what's called a beach hopper, is one of the common names. A lot of different common names out there for them. But if you zoom in, we're going to actually see the eyes of the beach hopper that these guys are chasing and digging up out of the sand as the water recedes. I've actually dug in and pulled up handfuls of sand to dig through and find these guys. Pretty cool that they're surviving on that. The phalaropes are known for their spin feeding, creating a little vortex, going in a circle and pulling that food source up to the surface, where they usually just pick it off of the surface. Here's a red phalarope. Occasionally, though, these guys will tip feed, much like a puddle duck. This is a piping plover that has obviously packed on a lot of fat for migration. This was on the Lake Erie shore many years ago. And he's got a big old softball type shape to him because of all the extra fat that he's packed on. During migration, these birds are actually able to shrink their internal organs to make more room for the fat reserves they need for their long flights. More on long flights later. This is I wish we were live so I could ask if anybody recognizes what species this is, but we don't see it in this plumage hardly ever. This was also at Whitefish Point in early June one year, but this is a sanderling. Again, fully packed with fat. He hardly has any neck. Was thrilled to get that one. So they have a lot of different strategies for foraging, and then a lot of behavior because they actually maintain feeding territories that they're willing to fight over. The sanderling has dropped its near wing and raised its back feathers in response to another shorebird getting too close to his feeding area. These black-bellied plovers were actually fighting over this open clam. There was a ruddy turnstone that would come in and try to get after it as well, but the black-bellied plover seemed to dominate. These semi-palmated plovers are fighting over feeding territory. This was also up at Point Mouillet. Anybody knows or has been there. And this was up at Sleeping Bear Dunes, this series of Whimbrel with the piping plover. I don't know if anybody can see the piping plover in the shot, but it's hiding off to the side here. This Whimbrel's in migration, and he's decided to stop at Sleeping Bear Dunes, within a territory of the breeding piping plover. Now, I don't know how much they outweigh the piping plover, but it's got to be 10 times at least. But this piping plover was having nothing to do with this Whimbrel being in his breeding grounds. He was standing up to the bully, and maybe even being the bully, chasing this Whimbrel right the heck out of his space, which I thought was a really, really cool interaction that Jamie captured. So these birds are arriving on the breeding grounds with a little bit of a fat reserve because they get up there and it might be breeding time, or it might be, hey, I got to survive for a few days. The weather's still really bad, super cold, lots of ice around, very few bugs. So these birds are kind of living on the edge. They want to get there early to establish a territory because they've got a short turnaround to be able to mate select, build a nest, lay the eggs, hatch the chicks, raise the young, all that fun stuff. So they want to get there super early, and a lot of times they get there when there's a ton of snow on the ground. This was from last year's trip to Barrow. There was actually 3 curlew sandpipers, 2 males and a female that showed up. Super rare birds anytime they're found in the US. And a real treat to get it in full breeding plumage. But again, they're there, and it is whiteout conditions as far as the ice and snow cover. So they got to be prepared to survive. But it doesn't take long to melt off, and these birds start doing just incredible displays. And it's, you know, I've been to Barrow many, many times. I've been fortunate to go up there. The draw for most people on the first visit is all of the eiders and loons and Jaegers. But I still get a heck of a kick out of going up there because of all the incredible breeding displays from the shorebirds, especially. So the American golden plovers and a number of other species will do a parallel flight display at the edge of a territory. So there's another male not too far to the out of the frame to the right that is flying the same line. They're just kind of establishing ground rules, who has what territory. The semi plovers do some incredible aerial flights. They look like a short-eared owl in flight with that real bounding motion, that real buoyant look to them. Very strange to see shorebirds up off the ground, perched, but the snipe do that on the prairie potholes for their calling. And lesser yellowlegs will pop up on top of a stunted spruce. This is a white spruce in the interior of Alaska or wherever they breed in Canada. And this is the Hudsonian Godwit up at Churchill, another one that's going to pop up and do wing displays up on a short spruce. So yeah, on the migration, things aren't nearly as interesting as the breeding grounds. Not much calling, not much fighting, a little bit of fighting, but not a ton. But the breeding displays, really get me. This Dunlin had his wing up, calling, displaying. He did a little march down the slope and ended up copulating with a female. So this was part of an attraction display that the Dunlin do. White rump sandpipers also will do a wing up display, kind of a waving motion, assisted by the wind catching that big wing. Nice view of the white rump there. And semi-palmated sandpipers, especially in migration, super boring. Just quiet, small, unobtrusive, not much happening with those guys. But on the breeding grounds, they are off the hook. Lots of calling, lots of wing up displays. This guy was running all over this mudflat with his wings up, calling, tail cocked in the air. Just ridiculous behavior from him. And then also they do this wonderful flight display where they fly up into the wind and they hover in place for a good long period of time, up to a minute or so. Enough time that you can move closer and get in position for the photograph. And I took many super sharp images of this bird with the wings frozen and everything, but I wanted to show the motion of the hover. So I slowed my shutter speed way, way down, and the bird was so stationary that it was actually able to get some sharpness to the face while blurring out the wings. If the wind's strong enough, they'll actually fly backwards. Super fun. Okay, this is the story that gives me goosebumps every time. Just got them. So we'd been on the tundra for a day and not seen any long-billed dowitchers. And the next day we encountered this group of dowitchers where there had been none the previous day. And as we started watching them, we realized that one bird would pick up a tiny willow twig and stand there and hold it and kind of show it off to everybody and then set it down and back away. Well, then another bird would come over and try to pick up the same stick, and then the fight would be on. So they would wing beat, kick, claw, fly off, chase each other away. Another bird would go over and pick up the same stick and repeat over and over. So the flock size diminishes, but then as the fighting continues, individual birds are flying back into the group. And this went on for a good period of time. Where the fighting's happening. They're plucking feathers off of each other in flight. as part of this display. Just super crazy. And I just couldn't wait to get home and read about, what I was seeing here. There's absolutely nothing in any literature that I can find about this behavior. So super cool to witness something like that. I've seen them, repeatedly in groups over the years, where they start chasing each other, but I've not seen that scenario where they're picking up the twig and setting it back down. I've never seen that again. This is a red-necked phalarope, and they have some really interesting strategies for breeding. So obviously the female is the brighter colored bird here. And notice she's got a lot of bling on her legs as well. But with the phalaropes, the female will actually lay the eggs, and the male will sit at the nest. Thus, that's why he needs to be a little bit better camouflaged. And she'll go off and seek another partner. And she may lay 2 full clutches of 4 eggs, which darn near equal her body weight in a very short period of time. And lo and behold, she bugs out. She heads south. So a lot of times when we're seeing, a phalarope migrating through Ohio or Michigan in late June, this could be a female that's already successfully laid eggs and is headed back south. Leaves the male to hatch the chicks and raise the young. A little bit more on the phalaropes later, some more interesting tidbits. I think a lot of folks are aware that buff-breasted sandpipers do a wing-up display. So I wanted to share some of that. I had talked to Kevin Carlson, if anybody knows that name, famous bird photographer and author. And he had told me, he denies this today, but he told me that the buff-breasted sandpipers would display at, that they might display towards me. And I didn't give it much thought, but I noticed while I was photographing this bird, I kept having to move back and back. And the bird was approaching me. And I do think it was, displaying to me. It didn't seem like it was threatening. But they do a single wing up, they do a double wing up display. You can see the little Alule flight feathers there at the wrists on this guy. Display as he might, the female here appears completely unimpressed. And this is an embrace display where the male has the wings up and the female comes and inspects those underwing linings. Not sure what she's looking for. Not sure if she has a sense of smell, if she's going for something there. But sometimes a male will pose as a female and come into this embrace and then fight with the male that is displaying because the males and females look the same. And I really don't know what I was doing when this photograph was being taken, but Tyler Ficker was kind enough to share it to me because I think I was just in awe watching what was happening. So he captured this one and was kind enough to share it. But the male's got the wings up. There's a whole group on this lekking site. Really something to behold. More fun stuff from Barrow. One of my it's my favorite place to photograph shorebird behavior for sure. Whitefish is my favorite migrant spot, but Barrow is my favorite behavior spot. This is a rough breeding plumage and very rare in North America. So he couldn't find a female. So he decided that he was going to take a liking to a female pectoral sandpiper. Well, the male pectoral was just mad as could be. The male pectoral is trying to chase this this ruff, but he's about a third the size and has much shorter legs, and the ruff is running through the grasses like a caribou, and the pectoral didn't have much chance against this much bigger bird. So speaking of pectoral sandpipers, This is another one that's really not very impressive in migration, but it might be my favorite. It might be my favorite shorebird on the breeding grounds. They just do so many really cool things. This guy's up on his tiptoes with his chest out. And he's on his little display post here, a beautiful moss covered tundra mound. But they do these flight displays, and they repeat the same path, so you can kind of get in position and capture that photograph. Anytime a bird is repeating a behavior, it gets much easier to capture this kind of thing. But during this flight, they inflate their pecs into this massive barrel-chested display, and they make the most surreal call. I think willow ptarmigan's probably my favorite bird call, but this pectoral sandpiper is a close second. I hope you can hear it. I'm going to try to play it into the speaker here. Can I get a thumbs up if you could hear that, Tracy?
We can hear it.
Great, great. So my first time at Barrow, I had no idea that they did this call. I had studied all the various, songs and stuff that I could find, but I hadn't come across this one. So that was really a kind of a weird thing to hear out on the tundra at midnight on my first night there. So they do this display flight. They fly over top of the female, but fortunately they wait to do the spare tire maneuver until after they've passed the females. That's the Dunlapped over his belt. Pectorals also do a territorial boundary, kind of a parallel march. So this is two males establishing, basically the property line. And they just kind of marched side by side down the property line, and they'll occasionally get into a dispute and fight about it. But a lot of times it's very peaceful. They just, it's like there's an invisible fence there. Again, with the pectorals still here, so the wing up, calling, stomping around in the water, tail raised, all to attract a mate. And if you look really closely, you can see the female is kind of waiting in the wings here as the male does his display. So all of this craziness that's going on the tundra only lasts for a really short period of time. As soon as they pair bond and lay the eggs, all of it stops. The tundra gets really eerily quiet compared to what it may have been just a few days before. This is for golden plover eggs. This is a black-bellied plover. Some of us are familiar with killdeer doing a broken wing display to try to lead predators out, away from a nest area. So this black-bellied plover started doing this. I figured I was close to a nest, got a few pictures and got away from them. To defend that nest, a lot of these birds will do various calls. They will sometimes team up against predators with even other species of shorebirds. This blackneck stilt was dive bombing me as I was kayaking, minding my own business in Howard Marsh. Avocet's really, really aggressive. I never saw a nest at this particular spot. There was a road that went between two sloughs. And this guy was just, crazy about swooping at us the entire length of the road through the slough. So I don't know if it was just protecting an entire territory or if there was a nest or nests close by, but really, really aggressive bird. But yeah, all this behavior is simply to try to raise young and pass on their genetics. One of my participants in Nome nearly stepped on this bird when he found it. He was just a couple of feet away from it. and it held tight on the nest. It trusted its camouflage that much. Here is an avocet nest. This was at a different location, and it was not actually roadside. It was across a ditch from us. And this bird is actually turning the eggs during the incubation process. And here's a pair of freshly hatched avocet chicks. You can see the little remnants of the egg tooth there on the tip of the bill. They have such thick legs for for being cute little fluff balls. Their legs are kind of ostrich-like. Another avocet chick. And the classic shot of the female trying to keep the chicks warm. So there's a whole lot of legs up underneath there, tucked under mama here. This is a Western sandpiper chick, and they just don't come much cuter than these guys. They are super tiny. I found a nest where the egg had actually, the top had been broken off of the egg, but the chick was still sitting in the cup, and did not stick around to take a picture. I think the big telephoto lens was too much for it. But super cute guys. So why do I have a picture of a lemming in my shorebird behavior program? Well, the lemming is the base of the food chain in the Arctic. And when there's a lot of lemmings, the shorebirds do really, really well raising young, good survival rates, lots of production. If the population of lemmings is low, there's a whole lot of hungry folks out there looking for anything else to eat. So you've got snowy owls and long-tailed jaegers, parasitic Pomeranian jaegers, all these guys, the fox, the other mammals that are trying to make a living. They are all looking for anything to eat, and the survivorship of the young and even the adults get beat up pretty bad by these birds when the lemming population is low. Wanted to share that tidbit of information. I want to move on to camouflage and what some of these birds are doing to protect themselves from those predators. So a lot of our West Coast shorebirds, you think about all the volcanic activity on the West Coast and the really dark rocks. So a lot of these birds that are on our West Coast are very dark. You've got the black turnstone, black oyster catcher. This is a surf bird in winter plumage, just really matchy to the environment. They virtually disappear if they want to hunker down. And they have a lot to fear. There's a lot of peregrine falcons working the West Coast, and these birds can see really, really well. I actually I was photographing a pectoral sandpiper, and it was a female. She laid flat on the ground and turned her head to the sky and watched. And I grabbed my 10x binoculars, and I'm scanning and scanning. It took me a minute and a half to find this peregrine falcon that was a speck in my 10x binoculars, barely visible. And this pectoral could see that bird and knew to hunker down and stay still. And I theorized that if she needed to be that visually acute, then I suspect it's because the peregrine falcons can see them as well at that distance. Pretty spectacular stuff. Anyway, the surf birds molt into their breeding plumage, and this is up in Alaska, and they completely disappear in a totally different environment. I was photographing these off the back of a boat, and I looked down to check the settings on the camera, and I looked back up, and I thought they'd flown off. They froze, and I could not see them for the life of me. Notice the red knot here, and lo and behold, there's all this orange lichen up and about on its breeding hills. The buff-breasted sandpiper, they're in a drier, grassier environment, and man, does their plumage match the scene. The ruddy turnstones have all this dark plumage on their backs and up on their chest, and where you find them is where the ground has had a heave from freezing and thawing, and the really rich dark soil is exposed. Really helps them blend. The Dunlin, they're all over the place where the scrub willow is on the ground. So the leaves left over from the previous fall, and they lay down and they just disappear. Just incredible camouflage. And then we see snowy plovers in the east are super light, like the white sand beaches in Florida. I'm sorry, that was a piping plover. Snowy plover. But this is a comparison, the eastern snowy on the left and the birds out west on the darker sand. So same species, different subspecies, but much different plumage just to match into their environment. And the snowy plovers will get down into footprints or any other little hollows to rest. A lot of folks know that the American woodcock has their eyes placed up really high on their head, which allows them incredible visibility above, forward, and behind. And there's one of those predators that they need to be on the lookout for. So not necessarily, American woodcock's probably not super high on the merlin's list of prey, but all the other shorebirds have to be keenly aware. This is a whitefish point merlin. So the story behind the purple sandpiper, we hadn't seen the purple sandpiper, but a group of shorebirds just went ripping down the shoreline really, really fast. And I thought there must be a raptor coming, probably a falcon. And the purple sandpiper did a U-turn, flew right at me, and landed in my shadow line in a shallow depression and hunkered down just in time for this merlin to go streaking past at warp speed. Well, this purple sandpiper was my best buddy the entire rest of the day. I think he realized that merlin would not bother him if he was close to me. I can't tell you how many times I got up and backed down the beach to try to photograph this bird, and he just kept coming. And if I went the other way, he followed me down the shore the other direction. He had buddied up with the sanderling, and those guys at least made it through the day. So these shorebirds are doing a lot of preening. They preen up to 5% of the day away. So their time allotment for the day, up to 5% of that time is spent just maintaining their feathers. Lots of feathers to maintain. Sorry, this was a lesser yellow legs. I should have stated that. Next, please. This solitary sandpiper was bathing in such a frantic manner that you couldn't actually see what it was doing. It would just move across the marsh and plunge into the water and take off the other direction and plunge again, but it was all blur. I had my camera shutter speed cranked up really, really fast in order to capture this. This is right before he dove headfirst into this little puddle. And this was all very frantic behavior just to get its plumage wet for preening. This is a short-billed dowitcher, so they do a lot of tipping, a lot of splashing to wet the feathers. They got to get everything good and wet so that they can then clean those feathers, and they can reach every feather on their body one way or the other, whether it be their bill or their foot, or tucking a head under a wing. And they spend all this time maintaining these feathers because they need them for insulation, for warmth, for flight, for long migrations. There's the chin scratch with the toe. Notice the little bill is open at the tip there, like we talked about in the feeding behavior. But then they have this oil gland at the base of the tail that they'll use their bill to squeeze and get oil on their bill or rub the oil directly onto their face. They're going to pull their feathers through the bill just to get all those little teeth in the comb realigned in the right manner. And this is that same solitary sandpiper, just stretching every feather between the bill. I'm not going to talk a whole lot on identification and molt, but this is actually a stilt sandpiper. You can tell it's a juvenile bird because of all the scalloped feathering that you're seeing here on the wing. And it's molting into its first winter plumage, these more gray feathers here that lack that edging. So it's believed that molting is a very itchy process for the bird, so they do a lot of scratching and digging and pulling on feathers. After the preen, though, you typically get a good shakeout of the feathers, maybe a wing stretch, and oftentimes if you get a wing stretch, they'll stretch the second wing, the opposite wing, and if they do each wing at a time, then a lot of times they'll do this double wing stretch as well, just to get everything aligned. It probably feels good. I know I don't stretch enough, but I feel pretty good when I do it. Yeah, all of this work is just to get ready for migration. Group of sanderlings here. A sharp-eyed observer might spot a semi-sandpiper or two. There's a number of locations around the world where shorebirds congregate in just absolutely astonishing numbers in migration. These are a lot of semi-palmated sandpipers. The Bay of Fundy can host 200,000 plus semi-palmated sandpipers. These are Western sandpipers, hard to tell from the photo, but Boiler Bay in Oregon can host 200 to 300,000 Western sandpipers. We've got the phalaropes. We've got a Wilson's phalarope here. Anywhere from 400,000 to 500,000 Wilson's phalaropes gather on the Great Salt Lake. And at virtually the same time, huge numbers of avocets and upwards of 500,000 red-necked phalaropes as well. The flock shots here were graciously loaned to me by Mia McPherson, but they get almost like a startling murmuration of phalaropes, up to 1 million phalaropes in a day on the Great Salt Lake. I hope to experience that one day. So I said I had a little more on phalaropes, and that would be the incredible migration of the juvenile birds. I mentioned that the adult females, they bug out early. The males stick around, hatch the chicks. Once the chicks are self-sustaining, the males bug out, and all the juveniles kind of congregate in little staging areas. But somehow, some way, these juveniles are flying out and catching up with the adults out on the open ocean. How do they know how to get there? Just boggles my mind. It's imprinted in their DNA. There's a roadmap or a compass or something going on there. GPS for all we know. So in general, the longest winged shorebirds are the ones that are going to be covering the most ground, the longest distance migrants. This is a Baird sandpiper, and it looks like you just grabbed it by the tail and by the bill and tugged it and stretched it out. Super long bird. It's a curlew sandpiper with those long wings showing. This was actually a spring bird in Ohio a number of years ago. But some factoids on shorebird migration. The pectoral sandpipers are have the longest migration route. They breed up in northern Siberia, pretty much as far north as you can get, and they migrate to the very southern tip of South America at Argentina. You just can't go much further than that. Pretty spectacular migration from the pectoral sandpipers. The Whimbrel, maybe you've heard of Whimbrels making the migration from up in the Northeast in the maritime provinces. They do pass at one point closer to Africa than they are to the Americas at times before turning southbound and dropping down into the coast of South America. But one particular bird did fly through a hurricane in that migration route. This was in 2011. A bird with a tracking device spent 27 hours flying into a very strong headwind of a hurricane. Bird was making about 9 miles per hour for those 27 hours. Once she passed through the eye of the storm, her rate of speed, she caught a tailwind and she increased to almost 100 miles per hour. The bird survived the migration, made it to its wintering grounds, and I don't know how long that bird survived after that, but that is pretty incredible feat. My slide's a little blocked with the meeting in progress recorded thing, but the award for the longest distant nonstop flight goes to the bar-tailed godwit. This bird species was tracked to do a nonstop flight covering 11 days, 8,400 miles from the coast of Alaska to Tasmania. So pretty incredible stuff. I don't know about you. I get winded when I run to the mailbox or climb a flight of stairs, but these guys are absolutely insane, nonstop, not feeding, not drinking. And they leave from the Alaskan Peninsula or areas nearby. That looks like the Mackenzie Delta area up there. Sometimes they cut across the Aleutians and head closer to Hawaii before bending back towards New Zealand and Australia. But that bird went to Tasmania. Their northbound migrations no cup of tea either. Note that it flies 10,000 kilometers to the Yellow Sea in China, a horribly polluted area. These birds got a lot of obstacles they have to accomplish. Also, in my trip to Australia, I was fortunate enough to actually witness a bar-tailed godwit doing his winter thing, surviving, getting fat, and getting ready to head back north. And if that doesn't impress you about these shorebirds, I'm not sure what would. It's pretty amazing stuff. This concludes the program. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Incredible photography, incredible story. Oh my goodness. I do see one question in there, which is, what's the best times to see shorebirds at Whitefish Point in spring and fall migration?
So the later you go in spring, the more likely they are to be in that incredible breeding plumage. I've been lucky to photograph black-bellied plover and that sanderling in full breeding. That was early June. I haven't spent a ton of time up there in the spring. Most of my photographs up there are in the fall. And typically the best time I always try to get there when the buff-breasted sandpipers arrive. So that's typically really late August or early September. Just after Labor Day weekends is a good time frame to be up there.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. So Brian, we would just like to say thank you so much for this. We have recorded it and we'll share it out to our website and social media. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to see everyone.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you as well. It was good seeing you too.
Have a great